Alrighty, I will call to order this public meeting of the Missoula Board of County Commissioners, Thursday, April 25th, and we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Are there any public announcements? Okay. Any public comment on items not on today's agenda? All right. The current claims list includes claims received as of April 10th, 2019 through April 17th, 2019 by our office, and they total $537,935.31. As always, you can go online and click on the agenda and look through what all those claims are that total up to that amount. We have two hearings today. I will open the Happy Moose LLC Ag Covenant Exemption hearing with a staff report.
Thank you. For the record, Lauren Miller, planner with Community and Planning Services. This request comes from Happy Moose LLC to utilize the agricultural covenant exemption to create a 40-acre tract. The agricultural covenant allows for parties to, within the transaction, to enter an agreement by covenant that will run with the land and revocable only by mutual consent of the governing body and the property owner that divided the tract, and that the land will be used exclusively for agricultural purposes. The property is located 7 miles west of Big Flat Road, and the current lot is 200 acres and is vacant. The tract is zoned CA1 agricultural and open space and is located within an area covered by the 1997 Butler Creek Area Plan. The plan does designate this area as open and resource, and this proposal would not violate any zoning regulations nor the land use designation. The proposed parcel configuration on the screen here will result in 2 total tracts. The agricultural tract, a total of 40 acres, leaving a remaining 160 acres. The tract is accessed off of Forest Service roads, and the applicant noted that the tract is proposed to be used for ag and timber purposes. He does not have any plans to sell the tract immediately, but potentially in the future. And this proposal was sent to county agencies for comments, and we did not receive any concerns from other agencies. With this, the rebuttable presumptions and general evasion criteria in the subdivision regulations were reviewed in the staff analysis, and staff did not find that this application triggered any of those review criteria. And as the subdivision exemption regulations require, the owner has proposed a covenant that will be signed by the LLC, acknowledging that the created 40-acre tract cannot be used for purposes other than agricultural. That will also be signed by the county commissioners today. So staff is recommending that the request by Happy Moose LLC to utilize the agricultural covenant exemption to create 1 parcel to be used for ag purposes as presented in the exemption affidavit be approved, and that the attached declaration of covenant be signed by the Board of County Commissioners. And that concludes my staff report. Thank you.
Thanks. Any questions for Lauren? Is there any public comment on the Happy Moose exemption? What a fun name. Seeing none, I will close that hearing and entertain a motion.
One question. Is there an applicant's representative
Oh,
here
sorry.
today?
Is there an applicant's representative?
Yeah, we do have the applicant here today.
Do they want to present something?
Or does...
Lauren did an all right job. You like the recommendation, I assume? All right. Sorry about that.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
Right. I would move that the request by Happy Moose LLC to utilize the agricultural covenant exemption to create one parcel to be used for agricultural purposes as presented in the exemption application affidavit be approved.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks. And now I will reopen the hearing for the Missoula Area Mapping Project with a further staff report upon the last one that we did last week. Go ahead.
Thank you, Commissioners. And we just wanted to provide a little more context on the changes that the Planning Board acted on. It has been sort of the sort of driver of most of the public comment, so we just wanted to dive into those a little bit deeper. And there are 6 main topics. The first focuses on 8-acre tract in the Y, and it's Lot 2 of the Dunblaker subdivision. So it's the 8-acre parcel next to that red, shaded red on the map there. The staff received about more than 40 comments requesting that the designation be changed from rural residential and agriculture to rural residential and agriculture from neighborhood residential. And the Planning Board approved that change unanimously. After that board meeting, we did get comment from the landowner of that 8-acre parcel requesting that it be changed back to the neighborhood residential. So that is that first issue, and that was approved unanimously by the Planning Board. The second topic was this area between Buckhouse Bridge and Blue Mountain Road. And there was a request from the landowner to expand the commercial center area. It was sort of in line with the yellow that you can see on the screen, and the red did not expand east. And the board voted 5-2 to expand it partially. It didn't fully meet the request of the landowner, but it did expand that commercial as is presented in that picture there. And that third issue was the Grass Valley, and we've received a number of comments on this between Planning Board and the last hearing and still today. And this, we do have a few suggestions maybe by staff that we'll dive into after we go through the Planning Board actions. But just to summarize what the Planning Board did, we did get comment from Fish, Wildlife, and Parks and Audubon and some members of the public requesting that this be designated agriculture to preserve bird habitat and agricultural soils. And the board voted unanimously to designate this portion, expand the agricultural designation, and then a portion here as working lands. So those were those changes. It does decrease the ability, or it doesn't, it's lower density than what is, some of the portion is zoned. And so that has prompted additional comment from the public. And this shows that current zoning in that area. So there's a portion that's unzoned, just in that center. The majority of the area is zoned CA3, which is 1 unit per 5 acres. And then there's some CRR1, which is 1 unit per acre, and a PUD shown in purple. And that unzoned area. And that agricultural designation allows for 1 dwelling per 40 acres. The working lands allows a range between 1 dwelling per 160 acres to 1 dwelling per 40 acres. There was a vote that was addressed striking prime from mentions of agricultural soils, and that's more of a text edit and was approved with a 6-1 vote. And then north of the airport, where the circle is on the map, there was a representative from DeSmet School who requested that this area be changed from industrial center to neighborhood center. And this was a tight vote for the Planning Board. It was 4-3 in favor of the change. And because of that tight vote, staff did a little more research into it, into the area, and we did see, so we got letters of support from 2 landowners in that area, and they own majority vacant land, and they're in the current uses could be difficult to make compatible with that neighborhood center. We found 9 industrial uses, 2 unknown, probably industrial commercial type uses, 2 residences, and 2 vacant lands. And then the last vote from the planning board was on this parcel. It's all owned by the same ownership, a square there, and they wanted to divvy it up a little bit more. It was previously all planned neighborhood, and where that green is, they proposed that be working lands, and then blend, sort of buffer the industrial by bringing that a little bit more across. So there's a section of industrial along the east, and that was approved by the board unanimously. And the planning board did overall approve the the map project unanimously. So that's just a little summary of the planning board. Do you want to switch? Or?
I could probably just sit here. Sure. Okay. In addition to what the planning board did, we wanted to make a few additional recommendations, mostly based off of comments that's been submitted since the planning board meeting is closed. I'm Andrew Hagemeyer. I'm a planner with Missoula County Community and Planning Services, for the record. All right, first off, we received a comment after the planning board meeting requesting a change from residential to live-make in the East Missoula area on the 600 block of Speedway. That's the area highlighted in red there where the change would be made. We would support that change. Second of all, there's been a lot of discussion about impacts to wildlife, impacts to agricultural lands throughout this entire process. We feel that maybe it's always been our intent through this process, and in the existing land use designations, the way that we have them proposed, that the design of any development could be flexible, where you would design a development to try to avoid areas that are sensitive or have an importance to the community, like wildlife habitat or agricultural land, and you could cluster your development on your site away from those sites, away from those important resources. However, it kind of became clear to us that that wasn't really coming out in the plan very well, and so we want to suggest some changes to the commissioners to try to be more clear what we want in how development is designed. And this would especially be targeted in the more rural areas, the more rural land use designations, where we really do have those, more likely to have those conflicts between development and undeveloped areas, essentially. And so we're proposing some changes to agriculture, working lands, rural residential and agriculture, rural residential and small agriculture, and residential. And I'm gonna hit these up real quick because it's just a ton of text, and I'm just gonna kind of summarize them. So when you're ready to start discussing and you're interested in maybe pursuing this, well, we can bring these slides back up and walk through them in more detail. But in the agriculture, working lands, and rural residential and agricultural land use designations, these are some of our less dense, more rural land use designations. There's a section in the land use designation called character, and character describes what your built environment would look like. We have a little bit of language about citing buildings according to these important resources. We think it would be stronger and clearer for the public and for planners and for the commissioners interpreting these documents in the future, and provide better support for our zoning regulations when we go to update them. If we made some of these changes that instead of saying buildings are cited, say development is designed to protect important resources. And then at the end, we want to talk about conservation design, setting aside major portions of the site for preservation, clustering development on the remaining portion. I think that's a much clearer way to articulate what we want. Next slide, please. Yep. this is sort of a pairing of that change in intensity in those same land use designations. Intensity describes the amount of entitlement across a landscape. We use a general term that says 5 units per acre or 1 unit per 40 acres in the land use designation. That's not to describe how lots are to be platted if they're created, but that each lot must be 1 house per 40 acres. But it's rather to describe the entitlement across a landscape. And so we talk about density bonuses in the intensity it's a carrot, it's a way to encourage even more conservation. And if you use density bonuses, then the public would get something in return. In most cases, what we're asking for in return is some sort of set aside in perpetuity. And so we would like to strengthen that language and tie it a little bit back to conservation design, and then describe how those density bonuses increase according to the area permanently protected. Just again, it was always our intent, that's how it played out, but we think this is much more strong and clear. Okay. Character in the rural residential and small agriculture. The rural residential and small agriculture land use designation under character does not have a description of that conservation design and clustering around resources. And rural residential and small agriculture has a lot of ag soils in them. So we think adding this language that we've put in the other land use designations into this land use designation as well would help protect those resources that the community has identified as important. And likewise, we would make the same suggestion for the language in the density bonus in the intensity section of rural residential and small agriculture. Next slide. This is back to Christine.
Thanks. And yes, so for the record, I'm Christine DeSenza with Community and Planning Services. I missed that at the beginning. Throughout the process, we've sort of heard that maybe we weren't doing enough to address affordable housing, and it was staff's position that we didn't want to impede in affordable housing, and we thought by providing a variety of types and providing more providing housing in more designations, more types of housing in more designations, we were sort of avoiding being a part of contributing to the inaccessibility of housing. And we did hear that comment, maybe we could do more for affordable housing from the public and some technical committee members throughout, and we thought we were doing enough. But I recently went to the National Planning Conference and went to a session on density bonuses. And there, it just sort of clicked in my head that maybe we could use that, associate that with affordable housing. So we wanted to sort of, as we were beefing up the language for conservation design and density bonuses, maybe get that involved in affordable housing as well. And so we addressed that in the residential land use designation and the live-make land use designation. And similarly, it's some similar language that we've seen for conservation design, but in the character section of the residential land use designation, we wanted to add that multifamily dwellings may be appropriate when applied through clustering or through density bonuses to create permanently affordable housing. And in that intensity section of residential, density bonuses may be available if development creates permanently affordable housing or if development is clustered according to that conservation design principle, or if public facilities such as public access or trails are provided. And again, in the live-make designation, sort of mirroring that language, multifamily dwellings may be appropriate when creating permanently affordable housing. And that is new. So the multifamily dwellings would be new in that designation. And then addressing the density bonuses may be available if development creates permanently affordable housing. Yeah, and back to Andrew.
All right, and definitely the topic of interest at the last commissioners hearing was the Grass Valley area. So we've been really working hard on trying to figure out what are sort of the existing conditions in the Grass Valley area and see if that might shed a light on what sort of path we can take forward. The way it kind of stands right now, the way we were kind of thinking about everything is either we go with the staff's recommendation or we go with the planning board's recommendation. It was sort of an all or. And we think we're going to suggest that maybe there's an in-between. And throw that out to you and see what you think. And it's kind of the idea. So this is staff's recommendation of the land use designations. It was the foundation that when we had a number of considerations that we used when we were creating the land use map. They always fluctuated throughout the map. They were never the same in every place. But in this area, what we were really looking at as the big considerations were the areas that are prone to flooding. So we have a lot of areas that are mapped regulatory floodplain in this area. And then we also have a number of existing entitlements, so existing zoning. And we as staff didn't want to recommend land use designations to the planning board and the commissioners in the draft map that were less dense than the existing zoning. It's not that there might be a legitimate policy reason to change those land use designations. We just felt that we knew, that if you have an existing entitlement, a couple of staff planners behind a computer in an office, closed doors, shouldn't be making a decision to go in a different direction than your existing entitlements, to lessen your existing entitlements. We thought that consideration should be made in a public meeting, like the planning board with the commissioners during a public hearing type setting. And that's exactly how it played out with the staff's, with the Grass Valley areas. Staff made this recommendation. There were comments. There were some people on the planning board that had certain perspectives. They said, you know what, staff, we understand why you did it. We think it's important enough to go a different direction. And so this was the planning board's recommendation. They said this area should be agriculture. And they based their recommendation off of two things. It was impacts to wildlife, potential impacts to wildlife, and potential impacts to agricultural soils in those areas. So I highlighted the blue there so you can see what areas the planning board actually changed. So one consideration is thinking about what is the potential impact in this area, given the existing conditions, given the existing zoning designations, what could really happen as development occurs? And so what we did was looking at existing lot sizes out there. Most of the zoning is 1 unit per 5 acres, so you need 10 acres to be able to have 2 houses, essentially. There is quite a bit of development potential out there. The red is in this map areas that are potentially developable, and the green in this map is lots that are too small. They couldn't add any additional development. They are less than 10 acres. They are already have their entitlement. Okay, so then we put the floodplain down. That changes things a ton. So the floodplain really reduces the amount of developable area in this. So again, the undevelopable area is the green, and the developable area is the red. And then you add conservation easements, and it takes out some more. So now we're starting to see that west of Dayshaw, generally speaking, there isn't much developable land left. That we're already, the impacts to agriculture, the impacts to wildlife have kind of already occurred. There are some lots left. Most of those lots are less than 20 acres. So over the next 20 years, my guess is we may see an additional 12 or 18 housing units west of Dayshaw. So I think the impacts to agriculture and the impacts to wildlife are not going to be significant under the current zoning in that area right now. But East of Dayshaw, as you can see, all that red is left. That's a different set of circumstances. There's a lot of developable land left. So there could be some additional significant impacts potentially to wildlife and agricultural soils that were pointed out. So our next step then was to, well, what are the existing plans? What does our current growth policy say for this area? So we looked at the existing land use map, and I wish I had a laser pointer. We don't have a laser pointer, do we? So I'll try to describe it the best I can because I can't get up and point on the screen for you, but anything that's not colored is designated as open and resource, and it has a density of 1 unit per 40 acres. Anything that is dark green, that Park OS, is essentially designated as 0 units per acre. I think it's more of I think we interpret it, and Christine, maybe help me out, as 1 to 40. Yeah. And then you have a lot of 1 to 5s in this area. And so this is what our planning documents have said for anything east of Dayshaw. That's been in place since 1998, we believe, when the Y. Mullen plan was adopted. Anything west of Dayshaw, we believe that was in place since the growth policy was adopted in 1975, the original comprehensive plan. So land use designations of 1 to 40 out there are nothing new. And areas that are zoned 1 to 5 with land use designations of 1 to 40 out there are nothing new. Now, some of the changes that the planning board's suggesting would be new. The area right down the middle where is sort of designated as that area that you can see the colors and the dots, that's the area that's more or less designated as 1 to 5. And so thinking about that, looking at this land use map, we thought maybe there was a way to, instead of have an all or nothing, all ag or all original staff recommendation, and making somebody on some side of the issue really upset. Someone gets all and someone gets nothing. We thought maybe there was a middle ground. And using these planning documents that have been in place for 20 years or more at this point as the basis for our land use mapping in this area today would sort of be a middle ground. And so what you got here is we've taken the land use designations in our current growth policy. We've tied them, made them good colors on this map according to what they would be in our proposed growth policy. So rural residential and small ag, rural residential, agriculture, and agriculture. And we put them on this map. So you can see we're suggesting that maybe this is a middle ground, that maybe this is a compromise here where this map does more than staff's original recommendation to protect agriculture. It does more to protect than staff's original recommendation to protect the wildlife corridors that are in place there. And those were the 2 big issues that people had. So next slide, please. And we'll come back and look at this. So you can kind of see the 3 together there. On the left is staff's original proposal. In the middle is the planning board's recommendation. On the right, staff's middle ground proposal. So it's less area that would be designated as 1 unit per 5 acres, perhaps, than what staff originally proposed. But it's in line with what we have in our planning documents today and have had for at least 20 years. So next slide. So again, the issues that were brought up at the hearing that we're thinking this can help address is the wildlife concerns. It does more to protect the river corridor than staff's original recommendation, the Clark Fork corridor. It widens that agricultural land use designation from staff's original proposal around those wetlands that are just off Dayshaw Road. It increases the protection in those draws that go up Butler Creek and Laval Creek, which helps address Montana Fish Wildlife's main concern about development generally throughout the planning area, that we need to find ways to facilitate connectivity between landscapes and the permeability of wildlife to move through development. And also, we have to remember that this area has zoning in place. So we have some predictability how things are going to play out on this landscape over the next year and a half, while we're moving forward to update our zoning regulations. So if this area was unzoned, that would be a different ballgame. But we have some predictability. Next slide, please. The next question is ag soils. So what I've got here is the new idea that we're putting forward. And on top of that is the slash lines is the prime agricultural soils and soils of statewide importance. And so you can see this proposal would increase the amount of soil of prime and statewide importance that's in the agricultural land use designation from staff's original proposal, although it does still have ag soils in the 1 to 5 that I guess it decreases the amount from the way to say it would be it decreases the amount from the planning board's proposal. Now remember that west of Dayshaw Lane is pretty much already built out, except for a few circumstances. So there wouldn't be a whole ton of impact to either resource on that west of Dayshaw Lane. East of Dayshaw Lane, where you see those ag soils, there is the potential. However, I think if we improve the language that we put forward earlier, I mentioned just a few minutes ago about conservation design and clustering, we would do a lot to then mitigate potential impacts to the ag soils in the area that would be designated 1 to 5 here. For example, there's a tract that's about 50 acres out here. That a good chunk of it, I would guess maybe 75, 80% of it is in prime ag soils. So if they were to develop under current entitlements of 1 unit per 5 acres, what we would likely see is 10 5-acre lots and potential significant loss of or impact to agricultural soils. However, with the language that would believe, really kind of clarifies what we're looking for in development design, and then the changes to the zoning that would follow next and would require some sort of conservation design in situations like this. Just for easy numbers, if the lots were 1 unit per acre, if you had 9 lots clustered on 1 unit per acre and then 1 lot on the remaining, or 1 house on the remaining tract, you would have 9 acres developed and 41 acres protected, 80%. So that's pretty good, protecting 80% in this real simple equation. The zoning regulations might even go further, but we've got maybe a couple 100 acres of agricultural soils here that would be at risk. So if it was all to develop under conservation design and clustering, we could have permanent protection of quite a bit of it, of maybe 80% or so. Yeah.
Out there, is there a typical lot size right now?
Or
Property size, lot size.
The lots that, you have a juxtaposition. You have lots that are in the 5 to 10 range, and then you have really big tracts left, right? And so I would say the lots that are in the developed lots are kind of range in the 5 to 10, and you start to get in the low 20s. And then the big tracts of land are usually, 100 plus, usually. So you have a real variety. So yeah, let's go back to this. Yep. So with the ag soils, we believe this sort of middle ground maybe would increase the protection from staff's original proposal. And then with stronger language in the land use designations about clustering and conservation design would help mitigate impacts to the ag soils that would be outside of an agricultural land use designation. And then also, again, I want to remind you that we have some certainty, at least in the near term, how things would occur with the one, because it is zoned. And as we work on that, in the meantime, we have about a year and a half before we have new zoning regulations that would do a much better job, I think, in the future. Next slide, please. So big picture, I want to zoom way out, show this Grass Valley area. I think it's pretty remarkable at this point in the process that it's really this one spot in the land use map that we're having a hard time with, that most of this land use map, in terms of the map, there's pretty good consensus around it. So I think that's good. We're really looking at one corridor that we're concerned about with wildlife, although it is an important one. And in the grand scope of things, it's with this sort of middle ground, we're looking at a couple hundred acres out of I estimated about 10,000 acres of agricultural soil that has still the ability to have agriculture on it. Next slide, please. So the summary is there is limited development potential west of Deschaux Road. We think that this proposal would help address wildlife concerns and of connectivity and permeability. I think Tori is here today, so maybe in discussions, if you want to ask him questions about how permeability and connectivity work, you could feel free and maybe help understand that a little better. It protects some of the ag soils. Others are hopefully mitigated through better design of development. And one thing that's important is it does help maintain those entitlements according to previous plans. So according to the previous plans we have in place, it helps maintain those entitlements out there. In the big picture, this is a relatively small area according to the big picture of what we got. So keep that in mind too. All right. Thank you. I think we're done. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, just a quick question for you, Andrew, and I'll be anxious to hear from members of the public on the new staff proposal. But what's your thought as far as what you've just presented here comporting with Fish, Wildlife, and Parks recommendations?
So Fish, Wildlife, and Parks really focused on these two ideas of permeability, which is the ability of wildlife to move through development, and then connectivity. And what the wildlife, as I understand it, generally they kind of hang in these riparian areas. They like to use those riparian areas, provides cover or whatever reason. So we've got, in the big picture, we've got this, the rattlesnakes to the north, and then we've got the Butler-Lavelle Creek act as a corridor coming to the south, right? And so wildlife come down through that corridor, and hopefully they're able to find a way to navigate under I-90, and Tori might have some ideas if they're able to. And then we've got a section of industrial land that's problematic, where we have the opportunity to perhaps work with the landowners, Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, maybe the county, to pull some of the stuff that's sort of blocking those riparian corridors through there off a little bit, give a little bit of more ability for wildlife to move through there. And then it hits those draws that come down into the flat. And those draws then turn into the marsh that then connects, kind of bends around northwest towards the Clark Fork. And so by following the plans that are in place, and that widens those corridors and connects the Clay Hill, those little riparian areas that go up through the Clay Hills, it connects it with low density, the ag basically, and so it makes that connectivity work. And the way, if you look there, and where Christine's sort of pointing it allows for the permeability of wildlife between development, hopefully, and hopefully creates that connectivity between the rattlesnakes and the Clark Fork Valley and then the Bitterroot Mountains. That's our thoughts. That I think, it's what we try to do, and what we've been trying to do this whole time is try to find that middle ground in this project. And I think it's our guess, our hope that this is that middle ground.
So that's a yes, that it comports with Fish, Wildlife, and Parks recommendations.
I mean, Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, what they did with their recommendations is they gave us the kitchen sink, as we asked for. We said, give us everything. If you had a blank slate, what would this land use map look like? I think it complies with the key principles of what they communicated to us and what they taught us about trying to develop a map for wildlife. I'm not a biologist, so I don't know if it's good enough, but maybe you could, if you wanted, you could ask Tori. Yeah.
Yeah, I just would love to hear what Tori thinks about this.
You pushed the button. Thanks.
Tori Ritter with Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. I'm a non-game wildlife biologist, but our input on this map was from our lion and bear specialist, our game biologist, our fish biologist, our regional manager, regional supervisor, even our comment coordinator was there. The person that had my position was there. So it was input from everybody on sort of every realm of fish, wildlife, and parks. So I'm really happy to see this middle ground. I think it does comport with what we were looking for in this area. In terms of the Grass Valley, just to kind of speak to how we're thinking about it, we have a mandate to protect and be stewards for fish and wildlife species for every resident of Montana. No single person owns wildlife. From the poorest among us to the richest among us, we all have the same right to enjoy wildlife and to harvest and use wildlife in appropriate ways. So that's kind of the way we're approaching it. For this Grass Valley area, it has its own intrinsic potential as wildlife habitat because these are wetlands. These are springs that spring forth, so a lot of times they're open during the winter, which is really a rare thing to have on the landscape for shorebirds and waterfowl. And then also those open grasslands are really, really important areas for raptor species, including several species that are rare and certainly in some trouble nationally, including Swainson's hawk, short-eared owl, and especially long-eared owl. It's one of the most prolific long-eared owl habitats in the entire state. So there's wildlife potential just there, even if it wasn't acting as a movement corridor, but also that Laval-Butler Creek coming out of the Rattlesnakes, kind of pinching down there at the interstate and then sweeping through the Grass Valley down into like the Clark Fork Valley and the Smurfett Zone site. It's a really major wildlife movement corridor for those species that need to get between those large ecosystems. So it's kind of a multi-scale consideration for that wildlife habitat. It is incredibly biodiverse in there for all sorts of different species, not just birds, but it also acts for wildlife moving through the area. And as Missoula kind of expands and starts to fill up these valleys that go out on each side of Missoula, if development kind of forms these sort of walls in those movement corridors, those big ecosystems can become more and more disconnected. And because Missoula sits in such this unique area where these sort of spokes of the wheel are coming together, being able to protect those movement corridors on the periphery and while still allowing development to kind of move through is something that I think is really, that we think, Fish, Wildlife, and Parks in general thinks is really, really important, and something that, residents of Missoula County, residents of Montana, residents of Missoula itself can really take pride in having those areas in the future. So that was a very long explanation. I apologize, but so I'm here if you have any other questions. Please let me know.
So I just want to be clear that was a yes.
That was a yes.
All right.
Yep.
And I laughed at the beginning because you listed off all the people who put time in on this, and I thought, and you're just coming to go for it right here on the spot without conferring them with them. But I appreciate that you did that. Thanks.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thanks. Just a general question for Andrew. So just help me interpret the map here a little bit. So it looks like, and this might be helpful for the public as they comment on the new alternative here. If we look just south of Roller Coaster, what had been identified as working lands, I believe, is now kind of a combo of of ag through those draws, and then what's the other residential and ag of some sort?
Yeah, it's rural residential and small ag, which is that generally 1 to 5-ish range. And then a little bit farther up is rural residential and small agriculture, which is generally a 1 to 1. And that is what our current planning documents have for that location in their growth policy.
Okay, thank you.
I had a question on the earlier part of the presentation, unless you guys have more questions about this part of it.
Still thinking.
Okay. Back to the kind of 6 trouble areas before that planning board made changes to. I was wondering if staff recommends going with the planning board's recommendations, or if staff has alternate recommendations or preferred their original recommendations. Specifically, I'm wondering about the Desmet and Dunbliker and Buckhouse decisions.
I'm glad you asked.
You want me to work the computer?
Yeah, so there's a chart of so here we are at Dunbliker. And based on the outpouring of comments from residents in the area, staff was recommending keeping with this planning board change. Yep. And then here we are.
Can you tell me specifically what the different, like what densities those are?
Yeah, so that as it's shown, it's that rural residential and agriculture, and that's got the range of 1 dwelling per 3 acres to 1 dwelling per 11 acres, right? Or
The
What did I do?
rural residential and agriculture is 2 units,
2 to 10, yeah.
1 unit per.
Can you speak
10
into the
acres.
microphone so we get it on the recording? Sorry.
It's on the low end, so the dense end, it's 1 unit per 2 acres. On the less dense end is 1 unit per 10. That's the range for rural residential and agriculture. They were requesting, or the original map had neighborhood residential, which is 8 units per acre or greater.
Is there anything in between those two density-wise?
There is, there's rural residential and small agriculture. And there's also, which is basically 1 to 1. Yeah, and then there's residential, which is 3 units per acre to 11 units per acre.
Thanks. I'm just thinking, I think in the short term, there's not necessarily the need for this, because we kind of talked about the number of housing units that this map would allow going into the future and looking, 20 years, 50 years. But on a longer term horizon, this is a good area to develop. And do we want to put in place something that really limits the development pretty significantly? You say yes.
Well, the other thing that comes into play is that there are covenants in place, and the community is a strong advocate to enforce those covenants, and that would limit development to 1 dwelling per 2 acres.
It's my understanding that it's debatable legally whether this parcel falls under those covenants or not, and that would probably have to be taken to court.
That's true. Mhm. But also, just rather than, or potentially, rather than putting a different designation in there, it would sort of be an island if it were the small agriculture. And then we have done a site visit too. Staff went out there a few weeks back, and there was flooding on the parcel as well. So there are additional factors that could limit development there.
Is that the flooding that they think is due to a part of the road construction that would be easily engineered around, or am I thinking of a different area?
Well, there's ongoing flooding. That's the same site, but there's a history of flooding on that parcel as well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And then, sorry.
Now, what's the density of the neighborhood right next door right now?
In the red. That's a community or a commercial center, and that allows multifamily residential.
I mean, what, the neighbors immediately nearby that provided so much comment,
Oh,
what
sure.
density are they living under now?
Yeah, so they would be under those covenants that are enforced at 1 dwelling per 2 acres.
1 per 2.
If it's maxed out. I think there's a rare family transfer that gets it lower than that, or more dense than that. But
And what's the change you guys are recommending?
to be consistent with that, so it would be the rural residential and ag and that's got that range of 1 dwelling per 2 acres to 1 dwelling per 10 acres.
To stick with the planning board recommendation. Yeah.
Next.
Then, yeah, does Matt.
So here's Buckhouse Bridge. And staff is comfortable with this. We went to planning board with sort of a middler ground that extended it. You can almost see that line where staff was recommending extending it to be consistent with the floodplain. And there's, I think you can see that. It was just extended a little more east, extend the commercial center.
Yeah, this line we had commercial originally going all the way out to that point.
So you had it going out to that point, and the landowner that's what the landowner wanted, or they wanted more than that even, and then
The landowner wanted almost this entire circle to be commercial, but it's floodplain, and we're not okay with commercial in the floodplain.
okay. And then why did this compromise make sense? It seems, and maybe we could pull up a map because before we've looked at like the Google view, this isn't helpful really. Sorry.
If you're willing to bear with me for a second, I can pull it up. But I'm not exactly sure why the planning board went with this. They just ended on it.
Because I think the work that you did kind of for the compromise with the ag land stuff was very thoughtful and analytical in this. I'm just wondering where this came from.
Oh, I think
Why doesn't Christine keep working through this, and then I'll bring up some of the maps, and then we can come back to this.
Okay.
should be in there now. And an additional reason why, for staff's recommendation, extending it east was that area is zoned residential. And so in an effort to maintain those entitlements, staff was recommending that further expansion.
Maybe you can point that out when we get the map up. I'm sorry. I'm having trouble following.
Yeah.
Yeah, as Josh just said, so we're trading residential for commercial?
The commercial would allow for residential, so that's how we were justifying that.
Okay, so here we've got Google Earth with the final draft, which is the planning board recommendations and staff recommendations. And so I'm going to zoom in on this area. So you can see this area right here that I'm sort of highlighting was what staff or planning board changed. Our proposal that we sent included this area as well, like so. And the reason why we included that is because it's outside of the floodplain, the regulatory floodplain. It's currently zoned residential 1 unit per acre. The public comments that they submitted were like, hey, we can't really do much with 1 unit per acre. We'd have more use for the property if it was commercial. It's on this major highway corridor. How about we want it all to be commercial? And staff said, well, we'll let you have the area that's not floodplain be commercial, but definitely not the floodplain will be commercial. And then planning board kind of went through this whole circular logic that I can't really get, wasn't really sure how they came to not including that one piece in there, but they didn't.
Right, because I read the minutes too, and I'm a little unclear, so.
Yeah.
Do you recommend putting that back that way?
We would be
or-
fine with that since we've already had, our original recommendation was this, so we would be fine with going back to this. But we're not necessarily opposed to the planning board's recommendation either, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then how about, were there more questions on this area?
Yeah. And again, I don't want to read into what the planning board may or may not have been thinking. Were they, since there's no perceptible development on that parcel, regardless of the zoning, I'm speculating that maybe they're thinking that this is contiguous with other ag land that ought to be preserved, as opposed to what's included there. There's structures on it. There's roads on it.
Yeah, actually, that's helping me trigger my memory a little bit. Yeah, I think they didn't want a big strip of commercial all the way between Buckhouse Bridge and Blue Mountain Road. And they didn't want it to cut off the agriculture that was in that and the potential for wildlife movement. That was sort of their logic, why they cut it off now I'm kind of remembering. That's why they cut it off where they did. They didn't want a big strip of commercial all along Highway
It's not
93.
it wasn't proposed to go all the way.
No, it would end right there no matter what. Yeah, even the applicant's proposal would have stopped it right there.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I know the one building is equine veterinarian, and that's okay for the ag. What's that other stuff back behind the commercial, though? Yeah,
In this location?
yeah, further back, yeah. right.
Yeah.
Trans solution?
Yeah.
And that's just going to be grandfathered, or why isn't that included, or?
And that area is unzoned currently and is within the floodplain.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So they would,
so-
yep, they're in the floodplain, so kind of stuck.
Okay,
Yep.
thanks. Could you go over DeSmet real quick?
Yeah, and so in DeSmet, it was or not DeSmet, I should say, it was north of the airport. Staff came with a recommendation of industrial center.
Where are we at here?
It's going
There
to
we
be there. Yeah. And stakeholders for DeSmet School got some letters of support from landowners in the area, 2 landowners in the area. I believe that they own the vacant land in the area, and they were supportive of this change to neighborhood center. We didn't get comments one way or the other from other landowners, and the majority are currently industrial uses. We could go either way. It might make more sense, given the current use of the land, to go back to the staff recommendation of industrial center. And I should say that the impetus for the request from the DeSmet School was to increase safety for any children traveling that area.
But since it's already built out in industrial, that would be quite difficult feat.
It could be. Yeah, we would have to probably be pretty proactive about that one.
You can comment during the public comment period. All right, were there any more questions or comments from the commission?
So I guess the other change that wasn't suggested by the planning board, but by virtue of public comment, was in East Missoula. And you're good with that additional live-make?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, staff is good with that change.
Sorry if I missed this, but what was your opinion on the planning board's change around DeSmet School?
Well, we could go either. We could be supportive of it, or it's a tough one. But given the use on the ground, I would say that industrial center would make the most sense.
Do you have a recommendation, or is that?
I mean, I would explore the planning board recommendation for now. And then if you're not okay with the planning board, we'll walk you through the, and there might be additional comment on that. I see Matt is here now. He'll probably comment on that. And then maybe when we get to discussion, we can talk about some of the more specifics, considerations in that area. Because there are objective reasons to do both. Yeah. Yeah. I don't think there's a real clear favorite.
I want to go back to Grass Valley for a second. And maybe if we could bring up the 3 different versions. So I saw Jim just came in, probably missed that.
And you're referring to Mr. Jim Cusker?
Mr. Cusker, I'm sorry.
Just in case
Thank you.
people don't know.
Thank you. I was referring to Mr. Jim Cusker. So looking at these just area-wise, it looks like, wow, a lot's been lost if you go from staff recommendation to new recommendation. However, if I understand you right, you're saying the stronger language around conservation design and the ownership patterns that currently exist on the land would be conducive to quite a bit of preservation that might even come close to approximating what the planning board was after, while recognizing current entitlements, or do you feel like it would be a net loss?
I definitely think that, if you went with an agricultural land use designation east of, it would really impact positively the protection of agricultural lands east of Deshaw Road. It wouldn't really make a difference west of Deshaw Road because it's already pretty much chopped up. However, if you want to try to think about existing entitlements as well, the one on the right would it does expand the agricultural land use designations from what staff has. So it does capture some of those ag lands that staff wouldn't have originally had in there. So it is an improvement over that. And then with clustering and with conservation design, we could permanently protect quite a bit more agricultural land than if we just didn't do this land use map and moved forward, if it was just 1 unit per 5 acre standard, whatever. So I think there's a loss. I think we would, from planning board's recommendation, there would be a loss to agricultural soils, but we would be mitigating too. So we would have some protection as well.
How about if we went with planning board's recommendations and really recognized this more clear language around conservation design? What do you think that would mean for the people that live there under specific entitlements right now?
They would have some entitlements then. Obviously, we would have to, if this is assuming that the zoning changed as well. Because if the zoning doesn't change, they still have their existing entitlements. Yeah.
Let's work off that assumption.
Yeah. They would have a net decrease in entitlements. So say if someone had 50 acres, and it was 1 to 40, they would be able to have 1 house, where right now they could have 10.
With that language, though, that may include density bonuses, could we, when it came time for zoning, offer density bonuses such that they could recover a good portion of those entitlements while conserving a chunk of land as well?
Yeah, I mean, theoretically, you could get some. I don't think you would ever approach what they have right now. Yeah, but you definitely could find ways to get closer to what they have right now. Yeah. The reason why I'm saying that is because the density bonuses would also theoretically be applicable if they had 1 per 5 as well. So, I mean, if you measure it versus what they have now and the land use map wasn't adopted, or if you measure what they have now and they couldn't do density bonuses versus the agricultural land use designation with density bonuses, we might be able to get kind of close. I don't know if we could get right on. If you measured it that way.
This is
Kind of close is compelling.
and this is somebody said to me that they don't understand what we're talking about when we talk about density bonuses, and I think that is we get used to the jargon. So can you explain more simplistically, what a density bonus is, how it's used, and how it can get us a little bit closer to where we're trying to go?
Yeah. So what you got is, so you have your base entitlement across a landscape. So if you have 1 unit per 5 acres is your base entitlement, and you have 50 acres, you could get your base entitlement would be 10 units. And you could do your standard design subdivision, 1 unit per 5 acres, and take up that whole 50-acre parcel. A density bonus, it's basically a carrot that says the larger the area that you permanently protect, the more units higher than your base density, your base entitlement is, you would be able to increase your entitlement. So say if it was a density bonus of 100% and you protected the maximum amount of area, instead of 10, maybe you could get 20 units. But the key is that the public is getting something in return. So there's some sort of permanent protection. We could also apply it, ag soils, I think, is the kind of the thought in this location, but we could also use it with wildlife habitat. We could also use it to say for public access to a river. So there are a number of different applications to it.
Thanks. Dave?
But in theory, I guess, and maybe this goes to Josh's point, at the juncture where we contemplate zoning or potentially rezoning in these areas of Grass Valley, I guess for the sake of argument, if planning board's recommendation was adopted, when it comes to zoning, you could structure density bonus language such that you could try to approximate the entitled lots of their existing zoning by virtue of a density bonus.
Yeah,
That's not too convoluted.
Yeah, we would have to pump it up pretty high, but I think in this particular situation, with the 1 to 5, you could get close.
I just want to make sure people listening understood all that jargon language interchange, because at least for me, that was very key in how I'm thinking about this, that last interchange. But I want to make sure everybody understood that, not because you aren't all really smart, but just because it's lingo ridden. Please speak up if you didn't.
So the question from the audience is who votes on the density bonus? And that would be the county commissioners when we get to doing zoning and when we adopt those regulations that go along with that.
Not the neighboring properties don't have any.
The neighborhood and the property owners do not have decision-making authority, but it would go through a whole new thorough public process similar to this before adopting any of that.
Yeah. So I'm kind of reiterating this, but just to be clear, that means anyone who wants to could submit written comment and then would come speak here as well. So your voice, you'd have multiple opportunities to have your voice heard when we have that zoning discussion.
Any other questions from the commissioners before we open it up for public comment? And ma'am, if I could get you to come up or just say your name so I can get that on the record.
Come on up.
Maybe okay, I'll open public comment and we'll start with you. That way we'll have your name. Thanks.
I have questions, that's why, and I didn't know if it's appropriate to ask questions. I'm sorry, my name is Mary Donnelly. Yes. Am I too close?
Some of your questions we might have to wait till.
Christine will answer.
Okay. Okay, my name is Mary Donnelly, and I live in Missoula County in Upper Miller Creek area. And I did attend early on some of the county pre-planning a couple years ago. And I also went to one of the planning get-togethers out in Target Range because I was very interested in what they were doing to protect their farm area and their land. They had 1 house per acre, and some had 5 acres. And anyway, I'm very concerned about that because I was online last night reading the plan. I hadn't actually read the whole plan yet, so I was looking at the project. And it seems like it's changed a little bit from my area, and I'm a little concerned because I would like to know what the process is, if it does go through and passes, what the process is for people to be able to still comment and change if it was voted in to be a more dense area. And our area currently is CRR1 in Upper Miller Creek. And it appears, and I may be wrong about this, the area has now changed to be residential, where it allows for a lot more density. So that was my question. And it's a zoning question, so I didn't know if that's the next step that happens, where citizens can comment then at that time, or maybe it's not going to change. I understood by the last meeting I attended that our area was not going to change. It would still stay CRR1. And I know that some Ravenwood citizens had commented. That's the neighborhood just below us. And the reason I'm extra excited about this today is because the legislator just passed SB 300, which is now on the governor's desk to be signed, and it takes away the ability for the homeowners association, the neighborhoods, to be able to get together and comment, not comment, but actually decide on their own decisions for their neighborhood. So my concern is, are we losing some of our voices in what's happening? And part of this, I may not know exactly all the rules of where we are in our planning stage, so that's why I kind of have some questions there. And if zoning's next on board and we have an ability to come at that time and make sure our voices are heard, that'd be great, but I just want to make sure that people in the county are not getting squashed on how they can comment, and make sure that their voices are heard and things just don't happen and we go, how did that get built? What is that?
Great, thanks. And generally during public comment, we do not entertain questions or dialogue. It's a chance for public comment, but these are really process-related questions. And so we will, just so everybody else doesn't come up and ask us a million questions that we probably won't answer, I think it's okay to answer process questions if you guys have.
Yeah, and so how it would work is, I think you have a good grasp of the steps. So this is that recommendation process where these would guide the zoning, and we have started, the county CAPS department has started a zoning update that would change the text, and that's going to be probably like an 18-month process, and will come before this board for public comment and the planning board as well. And then the plan at this point is to follow that up with possible changes to the map. And so that's going to have another public process where you could comment. And then just specifically to this map, I think we do talk about it in that text, but there's a lot in there. And it does allow for the process of individual homeowners or groups of homeowners to get together and make changes to the map. Because we do expect these to evolve. This will feed other plans plans will feed this area, and we'll want to reflect, future changes. This is a ambitious plan for the next 20 years, and we might not get it all right. So we do want to have that process for people to be able to change the map as they recommend.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. A little concerned about that, but thank you.
I'd like to ask you guys a question. Christine, maybe, I didn't mean to not say you and Andrew was leaving.
That's fine.
About the Upper Miller Creek, I'm curious on that too. Is that changing?
Oh, I don't think we did change the Upper Miller Creek. There might be more. We got it in line throughout the process. We got it more in line with the city's growth policy, but
The Upper Miller Creek, like way Upper Miller Creek, or lower Upper Miller Creek?
County Upper Miller Creek, the part that's county. I know the city does wrap in around there,
Yeah.
the Linda Vista area, but.
Yeah, the only change that we've made through this entire process, we pulled back some of the yellow, the residential in this area, according to some Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks comments, to allow more permeability and connectivity. Is that what you're asking through this process? How has it changed, or?
I was just curious if proposed zoning, but in the land use designation, is there much change?
Oh, from original, like
Yes.
today on no land use map? Yeah, this yellow area in the Miller Creek, a lot of that is currently 1 unit per acre, but it has roads, water, and sewer. And so we're suggesting it over time could increase in density. So we're designating it as residential. Yeah.
John, did you have
Can I
something to
say
say?
one?
Yeah, let me echo exactly what Christine said about the public process. But let me back up a little bit farther because, I didn't know this till recently, and so I wouldn't expect a lot of other people to know this. But your growth policy is not a regulatory document. In other words, if a subdivision proposal, if the commission is to adopt this amendment to the 2016 growth policy, and a land use proposal comes before the commission, they can't, by law, deny that proposal solely on the basis of the growth policy. They need to take into consideration and give substantial consideration to the growth policy, but the growth policy in and of itself is not a basis for denying a land use proposal. I just hope people appreciate that. What the growth policy is is your overall policy statement for how your future desired development and growth will occur in the county. And by law, it's required, the growth policy must guide zoning regulations. So as the county takes on this 18 to 24 month revision of its zoning regulations, it must look to the growth policy and the amendments like this one to the growth policy in order to enact those zoning regulations. And then those will be in place, and those will be regulatory when a land use proposal, a subdivision, for instance, somebody proposes a 10-lot subdivision. One of the things that the planning department and the commission has to look at is how is this property zoned? And so that was the final point I wanted to make. The public is having an opportunity to comment on this growth policy amendment. As it's already been pointed out, the public is going to have another opportunity to participate in and comment on the rewriting of the zoning regulations. But then there's also a third opportunity for the public, and that's when an actual land use proposal comes before the commission. And those are all done at public meetings like this, and the commission has to consider, they have to take and consider public comments and take those into consideration in making their decision. Is that, do you have any questions about that?
Just what is there a percentage of people that you, like the group that was commenting on that one land parcel that had the covenants on it, and then they wanted to pass it, and then the landowner did not, and they went back and forth a little bit. Was there a percent? You had like 40 comments from the people, and that was enough to sway it to not go through, and then it went back again? So I just wonder, is there a number that you need in your neighborhood to impact the decision? I guess is the question.
It's not a whoever has the most numbers wins kind of a situation. Okay. That's part of the consideration. I mean, overwhelming public opposition is definitely something that that the commission takes into consideration. But it's not a basis in and of itself to deny a proposal.
Yeah,
Okay,
and
thank you.
people are often confused by that, and they'll keep a tally of when there's 100 public comments on something, who had the most, and it's not a vote of the public, it's something that we take into consideration and weigh. But when you do get to zoning and things like that, then there can be actual protest provisions from public. So do you want to explain that really briefly? This might just confuse it more, but.
Not really. No, I probably confuse things enough.
Okay.
But
So at this point, no, there wouldn't be like the people voting and protesting and getting to change something. But in the next step of the process, which is actual zoning, if the commission makes a decision and the public is very averse to it, there can then be a protest provision. And then if they hit a certain percentage, it could overturn the zoning. So.
I just want to emphasize the could in there. From my limited understanding, it seems like there's a wee bit of legal gray area there, but it's could.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and just one general comment of clarification. So I think some folks, certainly in the public comments, some of the public comments I've seen have gotten tripped up by thinking there might be a one-to-one correspondence between land use designations, what we're talking about today, and their zoning, and particularly in those cases where if you're seeing a land use designation with 3 dwelling units per acre up to 11 units dwelling units per acre, maybe your current zoning's midway in there, so you're worried that you're going to that you might be currently being rezoned. Not at all. All that is saying is that we contemplate a future where maybe it would be ideal to have higher density there, but it's not rezoning or forcing that zoning or rezoning upon you at this point in time. Conceivably, it could be downzoned, but it also could be upzoned at a future date. So I think there's a little confusion at times that what we're doing right now is zoning, and it is not.
just going to add to that, that this map is an expression of values that were articulated through a multi-year public process, and I feel like described really well narratively in the opening part of this document. And Dave said this well, those values will be expressed in zoning that is not yet determined, and will also be a public process.
Ready to go back to public comment? Okay. Is there any more public comment on this? And please state your name, and then we will hold people to 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm Lee Bridges. I'm in East Missoula. I'm also the chairman of our East Missoula Community Council. I want to express support on what has been shown for that addition of the 600 block at Speedway in Minnesota. Thank you. That was shown earlier, and I had gotten my own draft to give you, but it's already been done. But I just want to let you know we have full support of that. We also want to thank CAPS for this growth plan process that we've been actively engaged with them for the last couple of years. This is a huge project that you guys have undertaken, and as we understand it, out in East Missoula, we have a lot of unzoned areas. A major portion of East Missoula is unzoned. We are looking at annexation in the future at some point. We realize that we would rather work with you guys in getting zoned before the city gets us, because we want to have our own designation, and we've been very happy working with CAPS, who's been willing to creatively work and give us this live make designation. So we want to thank you guys. This is our first step. Our next step is zoning. The Z word in our community has been a big fire flame throwing battlefield until this live make designation came about, and I think it's going to turn out to be a real peaceful, smooth transition seamlessly to zone our area now. Thank you for that. The item of affordable housing I just heard about today, so I really don't have any comment to that. I will only say that one of our main topics of concern in East Missoula is parking, and as we go through our next step, after all this is done, our next step in zoning, we'll work with them on that. So thank you for helping us understand. I understand that the affordable housing is for the residential and the live make, so we just want to make sure that parking is considered when it comes to zoning in East Missoula. We as a council and our community looks forward to working with CAPS and the county commissioners in our zoning process going forward. Thank you so much. You've done a great job.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lee.
Hi, Tori Ritter with Fish, Wildlife, and Parks again. I just wanted a clarification. I think what you had said right before I left there was a good thing to bring up, that I was kind of going forward with that maybe a little quickly. If, you know, what I saw when I saw that kind of 3-panel slide is a good middle ground. I saw the core of that wetland area protected, and I saw those movement corridors coming down through LaValle and Butler Creek still protected in some way. So that's kind of what I was basing that on as kind of our core goal when we were commenting on that area. If you do want me to take this new proposal back to that group, we can definitely do that and analyze it a little further. But that's where my comments were coming from. And, you know, there are, you know, small parcels that I'm seeing on there that do have some wildlife values that we would be concerned about. But that is something that we can pursue, working with those landowners, working with land trusts and things like that. So I just wanted a little bit of clarification on that comment. But we are definitely willing to take this map again and have another look at it and see if there's anything else we want to say. So thank you.
Hi, how are you guys? Pardon me for interrupting earlier. I thought we were talking about the safe corridor to the children, and as the representative of the school board, which is another municipal government, I wanted to make sure that we knew what we were talking about in this area right here. I also want to thank Andrew and Christina for all the work that we've done over the last 18 months on this area. What we have is, if we go kind of above Roller Coaster Road, where the railroad tracks are at, that's a residential area, and then that'll be in the bright yellow. And if we drop down to where the orange is at, we have another residential area. Both of those are in our school district. Students would be walking and forced to be on Highway 10 or to cross on the railroad tracks and then follow the railroad tracks to our school. If we had light industrial stuck into that middle spot, and this creates a horrible, dangerous route to our school. And just like we were talking about in Grass Valley, having developmental walls and movement corridors for the deer, we need the same thing for our students as they walk to my school. And that's why I contacted the business, the landowners in that area, Socorro and Kim, who both own large tracts of that. There's one other person that's in there already who it's already commercial. And we asked, could we make this mixed use so that we could create residential, commercial, and safe corridors going to the school? And it was a resounding support of that idea. And the school board also is firmly behind that. This way, having that development right there allows the kids to come down. We can create a path which would connect where the blue area is at, kind of. And there's a path there that goes to the school, and then it goes all the way down into Missoula. So that's that area that we're talking about. Does that make sense how I explain that? It's kind of hard with me I'm a teacher and I want to touch it really bad.
Could you guys
Put my hands all
Could you guys
over
do
it.
this now with the current map up? Move a cursor around and kind of show this off a little bit.
Yeah, I'll try to draw a line to show the movement of students, right?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so we've got DeSmet schools right here. And basically, this is the path a student might take from the residential area off
Into
to the west.
What is that looks developed there already? Is there a path through there currently that students are using? Or is that an industrial
That
use?
I don't know the
this
answer.
area right here, that's the trailer park. Is that what you're
Up at no, by the yellow, up to in the pink that's,
saying? Right there is Roller Coaster Lane, I believe. Is that what you're looking at? I
Yeah.
don't have, there's no
yeah,
house.
yeah, where you are kind of, Andrew, right to the, left and down from where you are. Yeah, all,
Sorry.
that's right. So that's a road, and that would still be a road if it was industrial, and then the whole rest of the thing is going to be along the highway anyways? Or are we talking about putting a path through here or something that's not on the highway? I'm not seeing how a path to the school. I mean, these are roads.
The land is undeveloped right now. I mean, if you
Right.
take a look at that. And so if it's developed as light industrial, like it would be across the highway, there's no way for the kids to have a safe route through a light industrial area to the school.
But that's a road that they're walking along. That
That
goes to
ro-
Highway 10. Is there a trail there? Is that
The-
how they're walking now?
Nope, they're on the road.
Okay. And so
That-
I guess, so are you suggesting that if this was more of a mixed use, that there would somehow be a path through this pink that would be precluded by industrial zoning? Because I know it's bare land now, but is the plan that somehow kids would go through the pink on a path and that would only be accomplished with mixed use zoning?
If
And
we put
that's-
light industrial in there, for an example, I actually had this a conversation with the planning board for a couple hours on this. If we walk across the street and we're into the light industrial area, and we're like, well, what if we had kids walking through there? We have a petroleum
I guess my point is
factory
kids aren't going to be walking through this. They're walking up towards the highway and walking along the highway.
right. I'm
And
trying
you have
to.
to have multiple landowners and go through some current stuff with a path for them to have a path off of the highway.
And yeah, I guess I'm getting a little tripped up on, it seems like I could conceive of addressing the pedestrian transportation issue regardless of the land use designation, because I used to do a lot of work down in Salt Lake City and spent time in the Amelia Earhart Industrial Park by the the airport, and there were hotels there, and it was terrible. There were no sidewalks, but I always could conceive of that commercial industrial area as having amenities built for pedestrians that wouldn't necessarily change the land use.
Yeah.
So, well,
I could be
I can answer that question. I'll get,
Let me just say this.
yeah.
It seems like the issue is more that there isn't a path along Highway 10 than the issue being what will happen in that pink area, regardless if it's in light industrial or residential. For students to walk safely, there needs to be a path. And maybe we're fighting about the wrong thing here.
But no,
maybe we
I-
should be thinking about how do we get a path rather than what the zoning will be over in this pink area.
I agree that we should be talking about having a path for my students. 100% agree. But there is a true argument for why the light industrial is an issue. On the other side of the interstate, where they have the petroleum facility, the students would not have a healthy avenue to the school because they'd be walking through an area that would be chemically hazardous. Do you see what I mean? And the light
That's necessarily
industrial.
an accurate statement. They're not allowed to release any toxins into the environment.
I'm not saying having the students walking by a petroleum fabricating facility is not safe. It's just not. And I'm trying to say is if we have it light industrial, we can't regulate what's going to happen inside there. So the question was, how do we do that? We contacted the landowners, asked them if this would be an acceptable use of the land, and they agreed. That's why we're looking at that as saying, well, let's keep it over on this side of the highway rather than moving it to the other side of the highway. Now the question is, is there a safe route for the kids to get to my school? No, there's not. There hasn't been one for 20 years, and we've been complaining about it forever. I got a 45-mile-an-hour speed limit next to my school, for crying out loud. I mean, it hasn't been managed well around the school. But let's not exacerbate the problem by continuing to create areas where we can't have safe neighborhoods, safe paths, safe ways for the kids to get to school. That's what we're trying to say. And we completely support this idea right here. The landowners in that area completely support this idea. That's what we're trying to lend our support to. And we can create safe routes through this. You can't necessarily create safe routes through industrial areas. That's the difference between the two.
Thanks.
The other one comment I wanted to make also was when we look at that area, it connects it as a corridor. I don't know if you can see that to where the school's at, to where we go above the highway into Butler Creek. So we actually do create a nice corridor there rather than having things patchworked around in between the light industrial. So it makes more sense for the long-term growth having it like this so that there's a growth corridor. Does that make sense?
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Any more public comment?
Hi, Jim Cusker, and I apologize for coming in late, but I certainly appreciate the fact that I got in on the discussion of possible options for protection of the agricultural land in Grass Valley. I liked Andrew's response where he pointed out that if you decide to go with the planning board designation of agriculture, that this can certainly have a positive impact on protecting agriculture in the future. At his a very capable presentation of this plan at the Open Lands Committee some time ago. And as was pointed out by John just a few moments ago, this is just the first step. This is the first step. The second step then is zoning. But Andrew also mentioned a third step, and that would be to go back to the subdivision review regulations, which was essentially tabled. And so the first step, as far as Grass Valley is concerned, designated agriculture. Zoning, then some modifications can be made. And then thirdly, within the subdivision review regs, then these other amenities that could be provided to developers, bonuses for clustering, et cetera, would fall into place. And that seems to me like a very logical sequence. Thank you.
Hello, my name is John Fry, and we farm off of Deshawn Lane on the east side in the Grass Valley area. And I do have some written comments to submit today. We were at the hearing last week, but I wasn't prepared to discuss much then. There were a lot of comments made about the loss of density of units. I think more than one unit to 5 acres being converted to something else. It's a concern of all of us as far as loss in property value and also loss in value to do conservation easements, which wasn't mentioned last time at some point in the future. And so I've outlaid that in my comments. I really like the ag cluster concept. That goes a long way to mitigate any losses in that whole thing. So I appreciate that being brought up. I've always been an advocate of that as a means to actually preserve farm ground, because when you start doing 5 and 10 acre parcels, so many of those, the ag property goes unused after people buy them. I know there was the property we have in Frenchtown, my predecessor did a 40 acre subdivision of 5 acre parcels. There's only 2 of those 8 parcels that are being utilized. The rest just sit there, and so it's lost from agriculture, actually. So I'm glad to hear that comment, and I'll give you my written comments if I might.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks a lot.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Alan McCormick with Garlington Lana Robinson. Congratulations, Commissioner, on your new position. We're going to miss you. And I note with some sadness that the 2 of you who are left have the combined experience level of about, what, 2 years? So we're all pulling for you.
Damning with faint praise, if it was ever, I think that was it. Thank you.
That's what you're probably going to get from me today. I have long wanted to write an article called "The Myth of the Non-Regulatory Growth Policy," but I don't have the time, and no one would read it. So, except for John. John might.
I'll read it.
Yeah,
for
okay.
sure.
Well, you're going to have to wait, I think. Feeling like we are heard and having you and staff make adjustments and trying to find compromise is critically important. And I find a lot of value in that. And it helps to ensure that we continue to come back and participate in these efforts. And so I greatly appreciate what Christine and Andrew have done, the research that they did in the interim with just a week of doing those maps and helping to show those resources so that we can sort of understand what's going on is incredibly helpful. And it's polar opposite of what my experiences with the city are right now. So I commend you for that effort and continuing to try to work with us on this. Andrew mentioned the land use maps out in that area. In some portions of that Grass Valley area have long been 1/40, and that's correct. You might recall from the letter that I sent you, I had 2 maps with it that sort of showed a radius around my client's particular parcel. And I received probably 4 calls from folks in that area asking me to make comments on their behalf. I turned down one of them specifically because when I researched their parcel, it's been 1/40 for the last 20 some years. And so I said, your designation isn't changing. You're getting the same thing that you've always gotten. So I think I really like what I'm hearing in Andrew's proposal in the compromise proposal. I'm just not quite sure because we just got this today. And so I guess I'd asked that we not make decisions, or you not make decisions today, so I can consult with my clients. They went on a trip to Germany, and so I'm not able to have them here so they can take a look at it. But I think I like it a lot. And I hear, Josh, what you're saying is, well, can we maybe go back to the planning board and then work on the zoning to sort of restore some of those entitlements? But I'd actually ask you to do the opposite. Because keeping those entitlements in sort of the compromise fashion that Andrew has, but then working on the zoning to ensure the preservation of those wildlife and agricultural aspects will help the landowners out there feel a little more comfortable in the process. Because if you flip it to 1 per 40, I get more worried that your future zoning will not substantially comply, and that's the magic legal language, substantially comply with the growth policy, which brings in that whole, is it regulatory or not regulatory? And it will actually incentivize people to subdivide now before the zoning changes. Whereas, because then you still arguably have the same entitlements and you can go out and subdivide now with those entitlements. Whereas if you accept what I think Andrew's proposal is saying, there isn't that rush because you've still got a 1 per 5 designation. You know that the zoning is going to substantially comply with that. It just may look different in how it incentivizes how you create those lots.
Alan, so sorry to interrupt you, but before it completely loses, I lose the train of thought. So you mentioned planning board. You're not suggesting that if at the end of the day today we deem additional discussion necessary to carry this over, that you're not saying that this should not go back to the planning board for more deliberation?
Heavens no.
Okay.
I wasn't saying that either.
No.
I wasn't sure exactly what you're saying relative to the
I meant
planning
just
board.
Take some time before making a decision today so that we can take a look at what Andrew's compromise proposal is to make sure that it's as enticing as I think it is, because I think it looks good. I just can't quite tell because I just got it today and I can't quite see the maps. And so, but what I heard was that Josh was suggesting going back to the planning board version, not back to the planning board. And so I'm sorry I'm not clear about that. Not back to the planning board for discussion, but the planning board version of changing Grass Valley. And that's what I'm advocating against doing because, and I'm just saying flip it. Leave the entitlements the way they are and work towards the zoning to fix it to better ensure that you get the agricultural preservation and the wildlife preservation. Because doing it, flipping it back to the planning board version will incentivize people to subdivide now, rather than waiting to see how that zoning might actually incentivize them to do things better than what you might get. So,
And we are at 3 minutes, just if you, but I know.
I took up some of this time.
Well, he was at 3 minutes, right, when you asked, but you can finish up since we interrupted you.
Well, I have 2 other things, and I'll stop with that one because I've got that one. Could I see the Dimbleicher map real quickly, and then the UHAS map? These are 2 separate things, whichever one's easier to get to first. And the UHAS map, you know which one I'm talking about, the commercial cluster. The Dimbleicher one, I know Dave will recall, I'm the landowner just north of those lots because the commercial parcel that's on 93 went through a review and I worked with the landowner. Landowner introduced himself and I worked with him and crafted a condition that you guys adopted for lighting to help that commercial work. And I understand there's a difference of opinion about the covenants, but I'm supporting the conversion back because my reading of the covenants is 2 per acre. It is flooding this morning. And part of that's because there is a big berm of earth along Waldo there from the pathway construction, but it flooded there without that. And it's flooding in a way where even once you fix that, the water goes down Waldo or the frontage road and it hits, there's no culvert under George Cates. So the water then turns to the north and it finds a culvert that's about a quarter mile up that direction, but it spreads back out into that field. So I know why they want the higher density because they're close. There's a sewer main that runs down Waldo, and they're going to trigger DEQ regulations that will require them to connect. And so that's why they want it, because that gets expensive because of that connection. But anyway, I support the reversion back for the parcels. The final one is the commercial designation at Buckhouse that you were talking about. There's an important point to note with it. Can't see it here, but Andrew had written in or shown where that parcel is that you were talking about that says, why isn't that other parcel commercial? And the planning board switched it back. There's an ownership issue here. Everything to the left of whatever that road is, so to the west of it, is a different owner than the owner to the right of it. So it's ended up playing favorites where those folks get a commercial designation, but the U-Houses who are on the east side of that don't. And so they've asked for that portion that's not in the floodplain to be designated as commercial so they get the same treatment. They've had about 4 purchase and sale offers on that. Every one of them have fallen apart because they can't do anything but commercial for that, or granted agriculture. But all the rest of that green is a gigantic area of agriculture and wildlife movement. And so I'd ask you to convert that to commercial, contrary to what the planning board did, because I think it's a reasonable compromise to allowing the areas that are outside the floodplain to be commercial, consistent with how the growth is occurring out there. And nobody's buying it for residential purposes, and nobody's buying it for agricultural purposes. And the rest of it will remain agriculture, and you won't get a strip along there because too much of it's in the floodplain. Sorry for going over my 3 minutes. I didn't realize we had a 3 minute today.
I said it, I think. That's right, you had 3 different topics, so I
But I
gave
had
you
3
3
different
minutes for
topics,
each.
yeah,
There
so
you go.
that's 9 minutes maybe.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Any more public comment?
Good afternoon. Pat Nagy Swartz, Meadows West landowner, specifically discussing the issues over the agricultural, the rural residential and agricultural designation for all of Meadows West. The county requires, when developments are proposed, specific covenants for the land that's going to be developed. And the Meadows West development has existed since 1979 under land use restrictions. And the people who bought in that area paid substantial prices for that acreage because of its location and because of the restrictions. And what I'm asking today is that you do honor those covenants. They're required by the county, they're approved by the county, and changing that, there's been the request to change Den Blecker 2 to neighborhood. And right now, the planning board has recommended that it be amongst the rural residential and agriculture designation, which is what all of the Meadows West area is, other than the one commercial lot. So if you think about the Meadows West development, within the exterior boundaries of the Meadows West, we do have a commercial tract of land. But if you read the language in the covenants and in the stipulation for judgment, it very clearly says that that tract of land can be commercial, but it will otherwise be subject to the covenants. And the reason the county creates and demands these covenants is for things like land use restrictions. So I ask that you honor the Meadows West covenants as they stand, excuse me, and that you honor the approval of the planning board's designation of rural, residential, and agriculture. Thank you.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Pam Simonich, and I too am a resident of the Meadows West subdivision. And I just want to thank the CAD department for their recommendation to go back to rural residential and agriculture. I just want to stress that after working and listening to what is happening, you have to understand that we have 190 residents up in that hill area. And north of Waldo and west of the highway going up to Evero Hill. There's 190 of us up there. And if you open that up to residential, that will, I think, create even more impact on the hill, on our roads, which right now is George Cates on the development that you're suggesting to change. And we have a private road and 190 residents up there that sometimes have 2 acre, they can go up to 10 acre. And when you open that up, that allows even more potential development, which I understand is what you want. But you have to also look at the covenants that we've had in place, and that's why we bought out there. And also you have to understand, after visiting people on Tookie Trek and on Fire Bucket, there is no water. So when you densely populate that area again, there will be no water up there. You have to think about that. We're all on wells. And yes, I understand there's a sewer right coming across Waldo Road. There's a development on Malham. There's 14 homes south of Waldo Road, and that's 1 acre per one house. We, on the north side of Waldo Road, is the subdivision's covenants of 1 house and 2 acre up to 1 house and 10 acre. So you have to understand there's 14 houses on the south side that has been developed like that, but you have 190 plus that will impact all of our roads, the private road of George Cates, but also the water. And so that's a big concern for all of us out there. Thank you for your time, and I appreciate what you guys have done. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Bonnie Buckingham with the Community Food and Agriculture Coalition, and I did give public comment at the last hearing in support of the Planning Board's recommendations for this map element. And I wanted to echo Josh's comment, actually, that this is a very visionary document, and it really is setting a high bar for where we want to be and how we want to grow and where we want to grow. And I think we need to keep that bar really high and ensure that we are conserving the best lands that we have for agriculture. Today is the first time that I've actually seen the third alternative, the compromise, and I actually think it does a lot of good. And I think that we can actually work with that and think about, especially with Andrew's discussion on density bonuses and different types of cluster developments, conservation developments, and work that into the zoning as well. And so I'm speaking on my behalf. I may be challenged by that by the rest of CFAC, but I think it is working toward getting the most that we can and maybe even getting more conservation in the future with that compromise. So thank you.
Thanks, Bonnie.
Anybody else want to make public comment on the mapping project? All right, seeing none, will it be the pleasure of the commission to contemplate this, sleep on it, think about it some more, closing public comment or leaving it open, and or waiting to decide or wanting to decide today on things?
Can I ask yet another question of our chair? Given that we had a handful of issues within this to discuss, is it possible to address these one at a time rather than in one giant motion?
Yeah, usually we do amendments one at a time, and then we'll adopt it as
Thank
a
you.
whole. Yeah.
Thanks.
And I guess I tend to agree with Mr. McCormick for those individuals, and this is not to protract anything unnecessarily, but for those individuals who might be seeing this new alternative for the first time, and that includes Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, or not Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, yeah, Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, excuse me. I think I think there are parties in this room or representatives in this room who would appreciate a little bit more time to contemplate the new recommendation, and I would not be averse to sending it back to the planning board with instructions to take a look at the Grass Valley area and this new recommendation.
Is it possible to do that without the planning board? Just meet up here in a week and hear what Mr. McCormick and Tori have to say? Sorry, I forgot your last name. I didn't mean to not Mr.
You're
you.
suggesting continuing the hearing?
I'm just saying that.
closing the public
I'm just saying,
comment
can we do that without going back to the planning board?
Yes.
That's a question.
Yeah, I suspect we could. So then it boils down to whether we would find value in the planning board's, that is their role, in their additional deliberation, looking at the new recommendation in light of what they had originally proposed. So I guess I could go either way, although I'm tilted somewhat towards letting them take another crack at the new proposal.
John, are there legal standards for when it would have to go back to the planning board? Like what would define a substantial change or something?
No, there isn't a legal requirement under any circumstances for it to go back to the planning board. It would be just a decision that is made in your best judgment.
Okay. Is that something we should take a vote on, of whether we would like to send something back to the planning board, or?
I would, if you are considering sending it back to the planning board, yeah, I think someone would want to make a motion, you'd want to vote on it. But I'm not recommending that particularly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously Commissioner Strohmeyer has expressed why that might be important to him, and I'm not saying that that's wrong. It's just, I think the planning board made their recommendations to you. You're making some modification to their recommendations, but it's not necessary to send it back to the planning board for their consideration.
I agree that I would like some more time, because there's actually quite a bit of changes. They're not, to me, they're not something that I would want to send back to the planning board, but they are something that I would want to think about for a little while.
Just out of curiosity, even if we did not formally send it back to the planning board, when is their next meeting? I mean, I would certainly not be opposed to them individually or collectively making a recommendation on this, even if we did not formally send it back to them, adding that onto the process.
So they meet the first and third Tuesday of each month, and the next one would be May 7th.
I don't know what the notice requirements we would have to do for that, if we would even be able to make the May 7th meeting. One way to look at it is we received 10 public comments today, and 7 of those people spoke last week. I think we're kind of at the tail end of getting people involved,
Yeah. I'm not a fan of process, but I feel like the planning board, to some degree, has said what they would like. We have that. That's not to say we don't know what they would have to say about the new proposal, but I'm going to guess that their recommendation is their recommendation.
So I'm sensing that I might be the lone voice on this, and I don't see the need to make a motion and vote on it. I would be fine keeping this in our bailiwick, but I absolutely would like to hear from Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, CFAC, property owners, what their thoughts are on the new recommendation, because I think that will be helpful for my deliberations.
And I heartily concur with that sentiment. And when you maybe saw me laughing a little bit when you first came up, Tori, and said, all these people have looked at it, all these professionals, and they deliberated. And now I just saw this 3 seconds ago, and I'm going to go for it, right? And I thought, oh, man, that's why I was laughing. So I'm really glad that you have the opportunity to bring it back to all those folks and have them give the same kind of attention to this new proposal that they did to the old one.
Great, so it sounds like the pleasure of the commission is to keep public comment open and continue the hearing to a future date. Right? Okay. When could we get that on the schedule for the next meeting? We've got it. I thought we had a calendar somewhere.
So there are meetings on May 2nd and May 9th. Both of them have, I believe, each of them have 2 other items on them. I'm pretty sure the one on the 9th, they're going to be pretty short, I'd assume.
What's on the 2nd?
The 2nd, let's see.
3 things usually.
And so on the 2nd, there is, I guess, so the first one is the phasing plan modification, and the other one is just a phasing plan extension. So those should be pretty short too, so.
Okay.
The 2nd?
Yep. Let's go ahead and continue this hearing to May 2nd.
We can get this change on the website by the close of business day today.
Great. Okay. Now I've lost my agenda. Is that all we had on it for today? Okay. All right, and thank you all for submitting comments and participating. I think that, we've come a long ways and this is looking great, so thank you. And thank you, staff, for all your work on this. Our meeting is always at 2 p.m. in the afternoon in this room. Yeah, and it'll be a Thursday afternoon. Sorry.
Yeah, I want to thank staff too. You guys did a great job, and I feel like I understand it's frustrating given how much time you've already put in, but I feel like we've come much closer. You guys did a really good job.
Yeah, great, thank you. Is there any other business to come before the commission? All right, we are in adjournment. I don't know how to say that.